Hey, my name's Ethan Brooks. I'm 27, a white guy living in this rundown apartment complex on the edge of Maplewood, a quiet little town in rural Idaho where nothing much ever happens. The place is old with peeling paint on the walls and creaky wooden floors that groan under every step. I rent a one-bedroom unit that's just big enough for me, my toolbox, and a beat-up couch I salvaged from a curbside giveaway. No roommates, no drama, just me and the occasional stray cat that hangs around the back alley. I work as a construction handyman, mostly installing metal roofs and laying hardwood floors for folks around town. It's backbreaking work, out in the sun or rain depending on the day, but it pays the bills and keeps me moving. I don't have a fancy degree or big dreams. I dropped out of community college after a year when my dad got sick and needed help. Now I just take jobs as they come, wear my faded baseball cap to shield the sun, and keep to myself. People say I'm quiet, maybe a bit standoffish, but that's just how I am. Observant, not chatty. The woman next door, Elena Harper, has been my neighbor for about a year now. She's 38, lives alone in the unit right beside mine, and from what I've pieced together, she's some kind of local architect. She specializes in these affordable housing projects that no one in town really talks about. Stuff like community builds out on the west side to help folks hit hard by floods or tough times. I'd see her coming and going at odd hours, always with a roll of blueprints under her arm or a laptop bag slung over her shoulder. Mornings, she'd slip out around dawn, dressed in practical jeans and a button-up shirt, her dark hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail. Evenings, she'd return late, sometimes carrying takeout from the diner downtown, and disappear into her place without a word. We'd pass each other in the hallway now and then, me heading out for a job, her rushing to a meeting, and exchange those polite nods that strangers do. Nothing more. She seemed like someone who carried the weight of the world quietly, always focused, never complaining. I figured she was just another person grinding through life like me. That changed on a chilly afternoon about a month ago. It was one of those Idaho fall days where the wind bites just enough to remind you winter's coming. I was in my apartment tinkering with a leaky faucet in my kitchen sink when I heard voices next door. Elena's door was cracked open and I caught snippets of a phone call, her mom's voice on speaker, sharp and insistent. "Don't forget to help Sophia with the flowers tomorrow, Elena. You're always so reliable." There was a pause, and Elena's reply was soft, almost resigned. "I know, Mom. I'll be there." I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the walls in this place are paper thin. From what I gathered, her younger sister Sophia was getting engaged that night, and Elena was expected to play the supportive big sister role, as usual. I stepped out to grab my mail, and there she was, struggling with a box of decorations or something for the party. Streamers, maybe, or gifts wrapped in shiny paper. She looked tired, her eyes a bit shadowed, like she hadn't slept well. Without thinking, I walked over. "Need a hand with that?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She glanced up, surprised, but nodded. As I helped her load it into her car, she mentioned the engagement party at the fanciest restaurant in town, the old steakhouse on Main Street that most folks like me only drive past. "It's for my sister," she said quietly. "Big night." I nodded, not sure what to say. Then, on impulse, I added, "I've got a pickup truck. If you need help hauling anything else, I can drive you there." It was just a neighborly offer, nothing more. But she looked at me then, really looked, like I was more than just the guy next door. "Thanks, Ethan," she said, her voice softening. "I might take you up on that." I ended up driving her. The truck's cab was quiet as we bumped along the rural roads toward town, the heater blasting against the cold. Elena didn't talk much at first, staring out the window at the passing fields dotted with hay bales and distant mountains. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the wheel a little tighter than necessary. "You don't have to do this," she said eventually. "I could have driven myself." I shrugged. "No big deal. Beat sitting home alone." She smiled faintly, and for the first time I noticed how her eyes crinkled at the corners, not from age but from a life full of unspoken thoughts. The restaurant was packed when we arrived. String lights hung from the rafters, tables laden with appetizers, and a buzz of excitement in the air. Sophia, Elena's sister, was the center of it all, radiant in a silk dress that shimmered under the lights, her arm linked with Dr. Nathan, the orthopedic surgeon who'd just moved to town from Boise. He was tall, polished, with a smile that screamed success. Everyone was toasting them, the mayor, local business owners, even the high school principal. Elena's mom, Lydia Harper, a stern woman in her 60s with perfectly coiffed hair, was flitting around, hugging guests and beaming with pride. Sophia's always been the star, Lydia said to a group nearby, loud enough for Elena to hear. We're so blessed. Elena was shuffled to a table near the back close to the restrooms where the lighting was dimmer and the conversations quieter. I hung back at first, feeling out of place in my clean but worn flannel shirt and jeans, but she waved me over. Sit with me, she whispered. As the night wore on, I watched how people treated her, like an afterthought. A cousin asked her to fetch more napkins, Lydia reminded her to help with cleanup later. No one asked about her work, her life. It was all about Sophia and Nathan, the perfect couple, the dream wedding ahead. That's when something snapped in me. I leaned over to Elena, my voice low amid the clinking glasses. I've heard about that community housing project you're working on out west. I saw the blueprints at the town hall once, the foundation layouts. You've got a real eye for it. Solid, practical, but thoughtful. She blinked, caught off guard. You looked at my designs? I nodded. Yeah, most people don't notice that stuff, but it's impressive. You're building things that actually help people. For the first time that night, her face lit up, not with forced politeness, but genuine surprise. No one else had mentioned her, not once. It was always Sophia, this, wedding that. As the toast dragged on, Lydia pulled Elena aside for a quick word. Don't forget to help Sophia pick flowers tomorrow, dear. You're always so dependable. Elena forced a smile, but I saw the way her shoulders slumped, like she was shrinking into herself. The room felt suffocating then. The laughter too loud, the spotlights too bright on the happy couple. I couldn't stand it. Leaning close again, I said, You can leave if you want. I'll drive you anywhere. You don't have to stay in a place that makes you feel small. She hesitated, glancing at her family, the guests. But then, with a quiet resolve I'd never seen before, she stood up. Okay, she whispered. We slipped out the back door, the cool night air hitting us like a wave. The truck rumbled to life as we pulled away, the restaurant shrinking in the rearview mirror. Elena didn't speak for the first few miles, just stared at the dark countryside rolling by. Finally, she turned to me. Why did you do that? You barely know me. I kept my eyes on the road. Because I see you. Every day, coming and going, building things no one appreciates. You deserve better than being background noise. She let out a soft laugh, almost disbelieving. No one's ever said that to me. We drove aimlessly for a while, talking about small things, her passion for architecture, my days on rooftops under the sun. For the first time, I felt like I was seeing her, really seeing her, and she was seeing me too. The tension from the party hung in the air, but so did something new, a spark, unexpected and electric. As we turned back toward the apartments, I wondered what I'd just started. But in that moment, with the stars overhead and the quiet between us, it felt right. The drive back to the apartments was quiet after that. Elena stared out the window at the dark fields, the occasional porch light flickering by like distant stars. I kept the radio low, just enough static to fill the silence without forcing conversation. When we pulled into the parking lot, she hesitated before getting out. Thanks for tonight, she said softly. I didn't expect any of this. I nodded. Anytime. She gave me a small smile, one that reached her eyes for the first time, and disappeared into her unit. I sat in the truck for a minute, engine idling, wondering what the hell I'd just done. But there was no regret, just a strange sense of rightness. The next morning came early, like always. I was up at 5:30, coffee brewing, toolbox already packed for the day's job, replacing a section of roof on an old barn out past the highway. As I stepped outside, I glanced at Elena's door. Something made me pause. I went back inside, poured a second cup into a travel mug, scribbled a quick note on the back of an old receipt. Don't forget breakfast. You looked like you were fading away last night. I left it on her doorstep with the mug and headed out. I didn't expect anything back, just a small gesture, nothing more. She didn't say anything when I saw her later that week, crossing the hallway with her blueprints. Just a quick nod and a faint smile. But the next morning, the empty mug was back on my doorstep, rinsed and dried. No note, but it was enough. I started doing it more often. Coffee, a sandwich from the deli on my way home, sometimes a clipping from the local paper if they mentioned any community projects. One time, I found an article about the West Side housing initiative she designed. The paper barely covered it, but I cut it out and left it with her coffee. Good work, I wrote on the margin. Simple stuff, but it felt honest. Days turned into a week, then two. We didn't talk much at first, maybe a quick morning or good night in the hallway. But the little things built up. I'd hear her door open earlier than usual, and she'd linger for a second when she saw the coffee waiting. One evening, after a long day on the site, I came home to find her sitting on the steps outside our units, staring at the sky. She looked up when I approached. "Rough day?" I asked. She nodded. "Client changes, again." I sat down beside her, not too close. "Want to talk about it?" She surprised me by doing just that, explaining the project, the budget cuts, how the town kept overlooking the details that actually mattered. I listened, really listened, asking questions about load-bearing walls and drainage systems. I didn't pretend to know everything, but I knew enough from years of building to follow along. For once, she wasn't explaining to someone who didn't care. Word started spreading, though. Maplewood's small. People notice things. A neighbor saw us talking on the steps one evening and mentioned it at the diner. By the end of the week, I heard the whispers. "Elena's been hanging around that young roofer next door. The quiet one with the truck. Poor thing, probably desperate after all these years in the background." It stung a little, but I shrugged it off. I'd been called worse. Then Elena's mom showed up. I was coming home from work, covered in sawdust, when I saw Lydia's car parked out front. She was inside Elena's place. I could hear the voices through the thin walls. Lydia's tone was sharp but polite. "People are talking, Elena. You know how this town is. Sophia's wedding is coming up. Don't make things complicated." Elena's reply was quiet, steady. "I'm not trying to, Mom," Lydia sighed. "You're always so reliable. Just keep it that way for the family." The door opened a minute later and Lydia left without looking at me. Elena stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking smaller than usual. That night, I knocked on her door. She opened it slowly, still in her work clothes, hair loose for once. "Hey," I said. "You okay?" She stepped aside to let me in. Her place was neat, bookshelves full of architecture magazines, a drafting table in the corner covered in sketches. We stood in the small living room, the lamp casting long shadows. "Why do you always let them do that?" I asked. "Why do you let them make you feel like the extra piece?" She looked at the floor, then back at me. "Because if I'm the one who stays behind, no one expects anything from me. No pressure, no disappointment." Her voice cracked just a little. I took a breath. "I get it. People see me and think, just a roofer, no college, no future. I used to let it get to me, thought maybe I was supposed to be more. But I stopped letting them decide where I stand. At least now I choose my own spot." She studied me for a long moment. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," I admitted. "But it's better than disappearing." We talked for hours that night about her childhood, how she always took the back seat so Sophia could shine, how she poured everything into her work because it was the one thing that felt like hers. I told her about growing up in a family of tradesmen, learning to fix things before I learned to dream big. How I'd lost my dad young and building became my way of keeping things together. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people finally seeing each other. When I left, she walked me to the door. "Thanks for the coffee," she said quietly. "And for everything else." I smiled. "Anytime." The next morning, the mug was back on my doorstep, along with a small sketch she'd drawn of a simple roofline labeled, "For the next job." It was the first time she'd given something back. And just like that, the little things felt like they mattered. A week slipped by after that night on her doorstep, and things between us settled into a quiet rhythm. The coffee exchanges became routine. Me leaving something in the morning, her returning the mug with a small token in the evening. Once, it was a pencil sketch of a simple beam structure. Another time, a note saying, "Thanks for listening." I didn't push for more. Work kept me busy, long days on scaffolds, hammering nails into fresh wood frames under the relentless Idaho sun. But every time I came home dusty and sore, seeing that empty mug waiting felt like a small victory, a reminder that someone noticed. The rumors, though, didn't stay whispers. Maplewood's grapevine worked fast. I overheard it at the hardware store. That architect lady, Elena's her name, hanging around with the young roofer from the apartments. Yeah, the one with the old truck. Wonder what's going on there. I ignored it, focusing on loading my supplies, but it got to Elena. I could tell by the way she started glancing over her shoulder in the hallway, her steps a little quicker. Then Sophia showed up. It was mid-afternoon on a Saturday. I was in my unit, sanding down a piece of scrap wood for a side project, when I heard the knock next door. Voices filtered through the wall, Elena's calm but tense, and another woman's, sharper, more insistent. I recognized it as Sophia's from the party. "Sis, we need to talk," she said. Elena let her in, and the door clicked shut. I tried not to listen, but the walls betrayed every word. "I know about your little moment with that guy, Ethan," Sophia started, her tone laced with concern that sounded more like judgment. "The one who dragged you out of my engagement party. People are talking." Elena's reply was measured. "It's not what you think, Sophia." But Sophia pressed on. "Look, Mom and I just want the wedding to go smoothly. Nathan's family is coming from out of state. We don't need any distractions." There was a pause, the kind that hangs heavy. "Distractions?" Elena echoed, her voice edging sharper. "You mean me? Am I a distraction now?" Sophia sighed like she was explaining to a child. "Come on, Elena, you're 38, single, and suddenly you're running off with a neighbor kid? It looks, I don't know, desperate. And with the age difference, people will say things." Elena didn't snap back, but I could hear the hurt in her silence. "You think I'm an embarrassment? Something you need to handle before your big day?" Sophia softened a bit. "No, that's not it. After the wedding, I could leave you my old apartment up north. It's nicer than that dump you're in. Maybe take some time away from him, clear your head." The offer hung there, laced with pity. "You deserve better than scrap, sis." I heard Elena's chair scrape back. "Better than what? Being seen as the reliable one who fades into the background? The one who plans your flowers and smiles while everyone forgets her name?" Sophia didn't have much to say after that. "Just think about it," she murmured before leaving. The door closed and the apartment fell silent. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange over the fields, my phone buzzed. It was Elena, her number saved from a quick exchange about a leaky pipe weeks ago. "You busy?" the text read. "I was out on a job patching a roof at the edge of town, wind whipping through my jacket." "Not really," I replied. "Just finishing up a patch job down the street. Wind's picking up." A minute later. "Can you stop by, have a drink with me, no alcohol, just tea?" I wiped the sweat from my forehead, packed my tools, and headed back. She was waiting on the stoop when I arrived, 2 mugs steaming in her hands. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of distant hay bales and cooling earth. I sat down beside her, not too close, accepting the tea. "Rough visit?" I asked gently. She nodded, staring at the cracked pavement. "Sophia thinks I'm a problem to solve." We sipped in silence for a bit, the warmth of the mugs cutting through the chill. Then she said quietly, "I don't need to be chosen. I just want to be seen." Her voice was steady, but there was a vulnerability there, like a crack in a well-built wall. I looked at her, really looked, the way the fading light caught her features, the quiet strength in her eyes. "I see you," I said. "From the first time I overheard you talking on the phone about that flood prevention design out west. The whole town ignores it, but you don't. You build things that last, even if no one notices." She turned to me, surprised. "You remember that?" I nodded. "Yeah, it's not just lines on paper. It's real. Like you." We talked more then, about her family, how Lydia always favored Sophia, the golden child with the perfect life. How Elena had poured her soul into architecture because it was the one place she felt in control. I shared my side, growing up as the trades kid in a town that valued degrees over calluses, feeling overlooked because I didn't fit the mold. "Society sees me and thinks limited potential," I admitted. But I stopped caring. I build my own way. The conversation flowed easy, no pressure, just 2 people unpacking the weight they carried. We laughed a little, at the absurdity of small-town gossip, at how we'd both ended up in this run-down complex hiding from the world. but underneath there was a pull, a closeness building that neither of us named. As the stars came out, she leaned back against the step. "Thanks for coming," she said. "I needed this." I stood to leave but paused. "Anytime, really." She smiled, and for a moment, the distance between us felt smaller. But we kept it there, careful, respectful, knowing the rumors were already circling like hawks. The days blurred after that evening on the stoop. Elena and I fell into a pattern that felt natural, almost unspoken. Quick chats in the hallway, shared lunches when our schedules aligned, me helping her carry supplies for her drafts. The rumors kept simmering, but we ignored them, focusing on the small moments that made the world feel less heavy. I'd catch her smiling more, her shoulders a little straighter when she talked about her projects. And me? I started seeing my own life differently, like maybe I wasn't just the guy fixing leaks forever. But the wedding loomed like a storm cloud over Maplewood. Sophia's big day was the talk of the town. Invitations sent to everyone who mattered. The community center booked for the rehearsal dinner the night before. Elena hadn't mentioned it much, but I could see the tension building. Her phone buzzed more often with calls from Lydia, reminders about dresses, seating charts, and family duties. One afternoon, as I was loading my truck for a job, Elena stepped out, her face pale. "Mom called again," she said quietly. "She wants me there tonight, for the rehearsal party. Says it's about family pride." I paused, wiping my hands on a rag. "You going?" She sighed. "I have to. Skipping would just make things worse." I didn't push. But that evening, as I sat in my apartment nursing a beer after work, something gnawed at me. The way she'd looked when Sophia offered her that apartment, like a consolation prize for staying out of the spotlight. I couldn't shake it. Before I knew it, I was changing into my cleanest flannel shirt and jeans, grabbing my keys. I wasn't invited, but Maplewood's events were open secrets. Half the town would be there anyway. I told myself I was just checking in, making sure she was okay. The community center was alive when I arrived. String lights draped across the ceiling, tables covered in white cloths, a buffet of casseroles and punch bowls lining one wall. Laughter echoed off the walls, glasses clinking in toasts. Sophia and Nathan were at the head table, glowing under the spotlights, surrounded by well-wishers. Lydia flitted about, directing servers and hugging guests. I slipped in through a side door, staying in the shadows near the back. Elena was there, as expected, seated at a corner table wearing an old charcoal dress that looked like it had seen better days. She nursed a glass of water, smiling politely when someone glanced her way, but mostly staring at her hands. No one pulled her into conversations. She was furniture, reliable but invisible. The speeches started soon after, Nathan's dad praising the couple's future, Lydia tearing up about her beautiful baby girl finding love. Sophia beamed, her dress sparkling. Elena clapped along, but I saw the tightness in her jaw, the way she shrank a little more with each word. Something in me boiled over. I couldn't just stand there. Before I could talk myself out of it, I moved toward the front, heart pounding like a hammer on nails. The MC had just handed off the mic for open toasts when I stepped up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice echoing louder than I'd expected. The room quieted, eyes turning my way. I wasn't dressed for this, flannel and work boots amid suits and dresses, but I didn't care. Sorry to interrupt," I started, gripping the mic like a lifeline. "I'm not a friend of the bride or groom. Hell, I'm not even family. I'm just the neighbor of a woman who's built more for this town than most of you realize." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lydia's eyes narrowed. Sophia looked confused. I scanned the room until I found Elena, her face pale, eyes wide. Elena's the one who designed those flood-resistant homes out west? The community center additions? Her blueprints. She's poured her life into making this place better, but you all treat her like she's just here to clap in the background. The whispers grew louder. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. Lydia mouthed something to Sophia. I turned back to Elena, my voice steadying. "I know you hate attention like this, but I can't watch you hide anymore. You've spent years letting them decide your place. Reliable, quiet, forgotten. You deserve more than that." The room was dead silent now, every eye on us. "So, Elena, walk out of here with me. Not for me, but for you. You deserve a dinner where you're not propping up someone else's spotlight." Gasps echoed. Lydia stood up, face red. "What is this?" she hissed. But Elena didn't move at first. She just stared, like the words were sinking in slow. Then slowly she pushed back her chair and stood. The scrape of wood on floor was the loudest sound in the room. Without a word, she walked toward me, head high for the first time that night. We didn't run, we just turned and left, the door swinging shut behind us amid the stunned silence. Outside, the night air was crisp, stars sharp overhead. Elena didn't speak until we were in my truck, pulling away from the lights. "That was insane," she whispered, but there was a hint of a smile. "Why?" I kept my eyes on the road. "Because it's true. You're not background, not to me." We drove in silence for a bit, the tension from the center fading with each mile. I pulled off at a small roadside diner on the highway, a no-frills place with neon signs and booths that smelled like coffee and grease. We slid into one, ordering simple, burgers, fries, nothing fancy. As we ate, the weight of what I'd done hit me. "I'm sorry if I embarrassed you," I said. She shook her head. "You didn't. You saw me." Her eyes met mine, soft in the dim light. We talked then, really talked, about the years she'd lost to being the dependable one, the hurt of always coming second. I opened up about my own shadows, feeling like the town wrote me off as just muscle, no brains. The diner emptied around us, but we lingered. Finally, as the waitress cleared our plates, I reached across the table. "You know," I said quietly, "some people build their whole lives around a house, then end up alone in it. But if you were in mine, even just sharing the porch, I'd call that home." It wasn't a proposal with rings or flowers, just words, raw and real. She looked at me, tears glistening. "I'd like that," she whispered, her hand in mine. In that booth, under the fluorescent hum, everything shifted. We weren't running anymore, we were choosing. 2 months passed like a slow thaw after that night at the diner. Maplewood didn't forget what happened at the rehearsal party. Whispers followed us like shadows. "Did you hear about Elena walking out with that roofer?" Lydia Harper was furious. Sophia's wedding went off without a hitch, but the sister's the real story now. We heard it all, filtered through the town's endless chatter at the diner, the hardware store, even the post office. But we didn't address it. Didn't need to. Life moved on, and so did we. The West Side project Elena had been fighting for finally got some traction. The old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts, once a forgotten eyesore, was being repurposed into a community workshop for trade skills. She'd designed it years ago, but funding had stalled. Now, with a small grant from the county and volunteer labor, it was coming together. I pitched in where I could, laying new flooring, reinforcing the beams, even teaching a few sessions on basic roofing for locals down on their luck. Elena handled the blueprints, the permits, the vision. People started talking about that too. That old building's turning into something useful. Elena's behind it, quiet as always. For once, the gossip had a hint of respect mixed in. We didn't make a show of being a couple. No holding hands in public, no dates at the steakhouse where everyone could see. Elena stayed in her small apartment, sketches scattered across her table. I kept to mine, tools lined up in the corner. But the boundaries blurred in the quiet ways that mattered. Mornings, I'd knock softly with breakfast. A thermos of coffee, fresh muffins from the bakery downtown, sometimes a rough sketch I doodled of a potential addition to the workshop. "Thought this might help with the East Wing," I'd say, handing it over. She'd smile, that real one that crinkled her eyes, and we'd talk for a few minutes about the day's plans, her meetings with contractors, my jobs on the roofs. Evenings, when I'd drag myself home after sunset, her porch light would be on, glowing like a beacon. I'd stop by, we'd sit on the steps, sharing stories from the day. No rush, no expectations, just presence. The family fallout lingered, though. Lydia called Elena a few times, her voice stiff with disapproval. "What were you thinking, causing a scene like that?" Sophia sent a text or two, polite but distant. "Hope you're doing okay, sis." Elena didn't chase reconciliation. "They'll come around or they won't," she told me one night, her head resting against the railing. "I've spent too long waiting for their approval." I nodded, understanding. My own life had its echoes, old buddies ribbing me at the bar. "Heard you stirred up trouble at the Harper shindig." I'd laugh it off. Just helping a neighbor. No explanations owed. We built our world in the margins. Weekends, we'd drive out to the workshop site, her pointing out structural tweaks, me hammering them in. One afternoon, under a clear sky, we took a break on the half-finished porch. This place, it's not just bricks and beams, she said, looking out at the fields. It's proof that overlooked things can matter. I wiped sweat from my brow. Like us? She laughed softly. Exactly. No rings, no photos splashed across social media, not that either of us bothered with that anyway. We didn't need labels. What we had was real. Mornings with coffee steam curling in the air, evenings with her light waiting, nights where we'd talk until the stars faded. One crisp fall evening as we sat on my porch, the one I'd reinforced with extra bracing just for these moments, she turned to me. Do you ever wonder what people really think? I shrugged. Sometimes, but it doesn't change this. She nodded, her hand finding mine in the dim light. You're right. We don't have to prove anything. I thought back to that first offer to drive her, the party walkout, the diner booth. You know, I said, echoing words from that night. Some folks build a lifetime around a house, then live alone in it. But if you're in mine, even just on this porch, it's home. She squeezed my hand. It already is. The town kept spinning. Sophia and Nathan's wedding photos in the local paper, Lydia hosting holiday dinners without inviting Elena. But we found our peace. The workshop opened quietly, a few locals showing up for classes. Elena's name was on the plaque, small but there. And me? I kept building. Roofs, floors, and now something more. No grand gestures, no fairy tale ending. Just two people who'd stepped out of the shadows, choosing each other in the quiet. I don't need a bouquet to know I'm loved. I just need someone who walks out of a crowded room full of whispers and chooses to stand beside me right here on the porch.